List off in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to the Moving Right Along podcast, the podcast that's by young writers for young writers. We're your hosts, Kat,
Ray,
and Ruby.
By the way, me and Ray are still sick because we're recording this on the same day as episode 5, so that is why we still sound weird, and that is why we're still coughing, and I have a lozenge in my throat at the moment. Ruby, however, is still the same hyperactive toddler, of course.
Oh my gosh.
we're making it through. We're trooping through. But anyway, today's topic is burnout and mental health while writing. And just a quick disclaimer before we start this episode, we are definitely not mental health professionals. Some of the problems we'll be talking about in this episode are going to extend past just our personal experiences and our tips. So please, 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 please seek out a professional for more information.
And I think a great way to start this episode is just asking the question, what about writing can be so difficult for our mental health?
Well, I think for many of us, writing is such a passion and such a love that we want to put all of ourselves into it. But sometimes that means burning ourselves out. Sometimes that means that we try to put too much of ourselves into it and it burns us out. And there's also a lot of pressure we sometimes put on ourselves for writing, that we think, are we writing a good story? Does it matter that if I like my work, if nobody else does, nobody else wants to read my story, so maybe it's not very good. And also there's so many ways you can compare yourself to other people, because you could see books and stuff like that and you think, why is my book not published? Maybe it's not good enough, maybe I'm not good enough. And I think it's really, really important to talk about how writing, as much as it can be really, really fun, there are a lot of kind of problems that sometimes we can face when we're writing because we don't address these kind of concerns earlier on.
And one of the problems that a lot of writers experience, which we've sort of mentioned in the past episodes, but we really want to dive into today, is comparing your work to other writers and kind of seeking that external validation. And we as writers, obviously, we're different people as well. I mean, I'm American and Kat's British. I don't know, that's the first thing I thought of. But
that's the only difference. Apart from that, me and Ray are the same person.
Yeah, totally. But we're very different people. Everyone's different, and so obviously our writing is going to be different too. So it's not fair to compare yourself to another person. It's not fair to say, well, maybe my first draft was 20k words and theirs was like 100k, or maybe the fact that I've been writing for 2 years and I don't know, these guys here can finish a book in a month. We all write at different paces and we write in different ways, we write different genres, and you can't compare yourself to another writer because doing that is gonna lead you to burnout. And that's just, it's not good. It's not good for your mental health, it's not good for anyone else's mental health, to be honest, and it's not good for yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, there's a lot of different more practical things that can happen that can really affect mental health for writers. I know something for me, something that makes me burn out so easily is rejection. Because fun fact, if you're a writer who wants to be published, you're gonna get rejected a lot. It's almost guaranteed you're gonna get rejected a bunch. And that can be really difficult because I know for me, when I get rejected, I can feel really okay, so I wasn't good enough. It kind of feels like not measuring up to what we as writers feel like we have to be. And I think that can be a really destructive mentality to have because it just makes you down on yourself for something that you shouldn't be down on yourself for. Rejection is just a part of the process. That doesn't mean it's an easy part of the process, but it's still a part of the process. But Ray has a controversial opinion on rejection. Why don't you share it,
I feel
Ray?
like people are gonna come for me for this. But, so, while Ruby hates rejection, I actually like rejection. And I will explain, okay? Because I know it's a bit of an odd thing. But while I totally agree with Ruby, rejection has and maybe will, it's made me burn out before. And I can't guarantee that it won't happen again. But the thing with rejection, and honestly, I could cover an entire episode just with me talking about rejection, but I'll keep it short. The thing with rejection is that I like it so much because when I get rejected, it tells me that this thing, although, yeah, it isn't, maybe it's not the greatest, maybe that's why I got rejected, maybe it's because I'm not a good writer, or something stupid like our mind will, lead us to believe. But the thing with rejection for me is that I know, okay, they told me no, but now I can make it better. and go back and get the yes from someone else. And that actually happened with, okay, fun fact, I actually recently, something sort of recently, I actually got published. One of my poems got published in an anthology. And I wrote that poem a very long time ago, and I submitted it to a lot of places, and it got rejected. Like, I think maybe over 12 times, which is kind of a ridiculous amount to be rejected. And I kind of started to feel that, like you said, Ruby, the whole, maybe, like, this poem isn't good, it's not good enough. And then I finally submitted it to this one place. It's called the Rainbow Choir Anthology. If any of y'all want to check it out, I mean, I'm just but I submitted it, and I got in, and I had this, oh, okay, so all those rejections weren't in vain. And that's kind of the reason why I've grown, not to so much as, like, love rejection, but to sort of treat it as my ally. It's not so much my enemy, because I know, like, all this rejection in the future is eventually going to give me that satisfied feeling of, okay, after all that rejection, I got accepted. So having the rejection kind of proves to me that even though I got rejected all those times, I still pushed through, and I got to that spot that I always wanted to be. And just don't let rejection get to you like it's gonna. Like, don't let it do that to you, because you're better than it. And it can go, I don't know, get punched in the face. I don't like rejection, but you should.
Yeah, that is a really healthy way to look at it. Something that I kind of think about when you talk about rejection is, you know, the way you said that you got rejected 12 times and then you finally got accepted to this, like, one place, kind of makes you think of how, like, some people say that, you know, the rejection is just so that you find the right place for you, because if they don't want it, then, you know, that means that it's probably not the right place for that story anyways. It's not where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be somewhere else. And you hear all these stories as well, is that for a lot of us, like, newbie writers, we think, oh my god, I'm getting rejected so much. I bet if I was a better writer, I wouldn't get rejected so much. And then you hear stories about all of these writers who've written these amazing stories who got rejected tons and tons of times. Like, you know, some of the biggest writers get rejected. I mean, an example I can think of recently is, you know, if any of you have watched Squid Game, which I have, obviously it's like the biggest show on Netflix at the moment, but there's a story going around about how the writer of it, he got rejected for 11 years. 11 years that story got rejected because nobody wanted to pick it up, and then finally Netflix picked it up, and now it's like the biggest show on Netflix. And maybe if it had been picked up earlier by a different like place, it wouldn't have had the same impact that it does now. So it's all about putting that into perspective and remembering that, you know, sometimes it just means that something better is going to come along. That's why you were rejected this time.
Yeah, so just overall, when it comes to rejection, really just do your best to not let it make you burn out, because it can be really easy to do so. And speaking of burning out, we all wanted to talk just a little bit about our experiences with burnout. And I can start us off because I'm literally burnt out right now. I get burnt out on writing really easily. As has been mentioned previously, I'm a very fast drafter. I'm used to writing like 50K in a month, sometimes more. That's just like the pace I've always been at. And most recently I've been working on a new book, and I got to about probably like the 50K mark, and then all of a sudden I just like hit a complete block, and the book isn't done. I still need to write like the last like 5 chapters, but I literally just haven't been able to do it. And what I think went wrong is that I just started like, I was literally forcing myself to write. And my mental health as of recently hasn't been great, so it was on top of like just everyday life struggles. I was struggling so much with writing, which was something that before I hadn't really struggled with. Like, it was always like, oh, writing's this thing that I can do, like that's what I'm good at, like fast drafting, that's what I'm good at. And so all of a sudden I wasn't good at it anymore, and it just felt like so like soul deadening, like it felt so discouraging. And so I just got really burnt out to the point that I just had to put the project down. You know, it's funny, with the amount of like books I've written, I've never put a project down before, and it just felt like really weird. And I think it was really difficult, and I think I was really angry at myself for it for a hot minute there. I was like, why are you not like able to do this? But then I just realized that I need to prioritize my mental health over writing this book. because I think writing became like not really like fun anymore. It just kind of was like this chore that I had to tick off of what I was doing in the day, and I think that that's what burnt me out, is forcing myself to do something that I wasn't enjoying anymore and that was honestly just draining me instead of filling me up. So that's my experience with burnout. I'm still in the midst of it, and I'm hoping that I will come out the other side, but I just had to take a break. So yeah, that's my experience with burnout. So what about you guys?
That's really great that, like, it's so great that you burnt out. Sorry, that I saw that sentence wrong. But it's really great that you can recognize that you needed to take that time off, because I know some people would have just said, oh, I need to push through this, but Ruby knew that she had to let it go. So I think that's really important, knowing where your limit is. I'd say I've never been so burnt out that I've stopped writing completely, but I have been like burnt out on a project before. I kind of have a rule where I don't, like, if I've written a first draft, or like if I've overextended myself on a project, I'm gonna leave it for like 6 months and then come back to it, because I find that if I'm really burnt out on a project, I'll just leave it for a few months and then come back to it later, and I'll focus my time on sort of different writing exercises. That's one of my things that I like to do, because I do really enjoy writing all the time. But obviously, if, for example, when I'm writing a book for such a long time and it's like really, really difficult writing that, I'm going to say, okay, this is burning me out, I'm going to write something else. Like, I like to write poetry if I'm really burnt out, because it's a different form of writing, and for me, it's like less pressure. But I know that some people just want to take a break completely, and that is totally fine. It's up to you how you want to take the break, because for me, I like to take a break by writing different things, because I still really, really enjoy the process of writing. It's about finding that love for writing again. And yeah, that's what my thoughts on my own burnout are. What about you, Ray? Have you ever been burnt out writing?
So I'm also like, I don't know if I would consider it burnout, but I'm more on a rest period for me. I usually kind of, okay, this is gonna sound a little weird, but I'm spirit. It's part of my religion. Okay, leave me alone. But I kind of follow like nature. Oh no, this sounds so cheesy, but like sort of like how winter kind of goes into a rest period. I like to kind of follow that. And I know for me, like when I get to school and stuff, like I like to sort of chill out in my writing. And right now, I kind of, in the beginning of September, I came upon a part where in my writing where I realized if I keep going where I am right now, I'm gonna get burnt out real soon. So I kind of just took a step back, detached myself from writing. I haven't written since like the beginning of September, I think, which is actually really impressive for me, because usually I'm like glued to my computer, like I have to finish this page. But as of now, I've just been kind of taking a break, and I've been burnt out before, and it's not fun at all, but I think it's really important to take breaks. And if you're one of the people like me who just physically can't step away from the whole writing world thing, you can use this as your time to read. I've been doing a lot of reading. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, actually, because another crazy, I'm gonna get made fun of so bad this episode. I like rejection, and I'm about to tell you, I love research. I love just like for fun. It's fun, okay? All right. I think it's really important for people to recognize when they're kind of coming up on burnout, because I think if you kind of my biggest tip, listen to yourself. Even if you take a break, like you're still a writer, and this kind of relates back to what we said in the What Counts as Real Writing episode, but it doesn't matter because you're still a real writer. You're a writer. So take breaks when you have to, because then you can avoid the whole burnout and the writer's block and all the stuff that we want to avoid. So take breaks.
Yeah, that is true. I think you should take breaks. And like I said, breaks can come in different forms. For some people, it's completely and utterly just stepping away from writing. And like even reading, I know some people who say that like when they've been writing for so long, they just cannot absorb the medium in any way. And that's totally fine. You don't need to be reading to be like considered a writer. You don't need to be doing anything to be considered a writer apart from occasionally writing every so often, like once a year. That's what makes you a writer. And like I said, for me, I don't like not writing at all, because I just find it like it's a de-stressing de-stressing, is that a word?
Yeah.
Distressing. Yeah, de-stressing
Yeah.
activity.
Probably.
So something that I will always do is I'll write something fun. Like if it's something fun, so for example, if I've been writing something really heavy, I will just write maybe like a short comedy story instead. So it's about sort of recognizing the way in which you want to take breaks. But do we have any tips for other aspects of rejection, mental health and writing, any other problems that we think, you know, we have tips that we've all suffered through the problems of writing. So what do you guys think?
Yep. I think my best tip is that balance is key. Just learning to balance, like, writing and life, and if you're a student at school, if you have a job, your job. I think, we get burnt out when we overexert ourselves. And so finding the time to just, prioritize time for yourself is really important. Just so that you don't burn out. Because burnout is definitely not very fun. Pretty bad, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think one thing that you also said, Kat, that I think has to do with another tip for me is also balancing what kind of projects you're doing. Because I know for me, I got burnt out after writing a really heavy project, like at the beginning of this year. And it was really difficult because I kind of put myself in the head of a character who was like going through a lot of stuff. So I think it's important to balance, like, okay, is what I'm writing affecting me, like, in real life? Like, am I writing too many heavy topics, maybe ones that I can't handle? Or should I take a break from heavy stuff, work on some easier stuff, things like that. So definitely just balance. It takes practice, though, so don't stress too much about getting it perfect on the first try.
Yeah, and adding on to what Ruby said before, you have to balance your life. And if you're overexerting yourself and there's too many things that you have to do and you have too many responsibilities, I think it's important to remember that it's okay to drop some of those if you can. It's okay to take a step back from, if you're like me and you have like a million projects going on at once, it's okay to put a few of them to the side and just focus on one for now. So you don't try to do 3 million things at once and just you bend and you snap. It's not good. It's not good. But if I had any other advice, I would say you should really talk to other writers. I mean, for me, this whole podcast thing has really helped with this because I got these two people here. Y'all are cool.
Yeah.
OMG.
Oh my god, we
OMG.
got a shout out on the episode. We got a shout out on the podcast.
Shout out on the own
BFFs
podcast.
forever.
Yeah, but and just like talking about these things with other writers, because I'm telling you right now they're gonna get it. And just speaking with these podcast guys, I mean, just the whole thing has really made me realize, like, we share a lot of the same experiences. Burnout is a very universal experience. You don't have to be a writer. You can just be, you know, I don't know, a teacher and you can get burnt out. You can be an artist or a musician or literally anything and you can get burnt out. But talking to other writers about not only writing, but especially burnout and their mental health in writing is really important, because it's going to make you feel like, cheesy, but you're not alone and there's someone else to talk to there. And it's really important to make writing friends if you're a writer.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the thing about talking to other writers, because you have no idea how. So often, like, when we're in that headspace, we think, oh, I'm the only one struggling with this. And then you talk to someone, it's like, no, we're all struggling with burnout. We're all struggling with this kind of thing. And it makes you feel less alone. Something that I think is also important to remember is that often in media, we have this sort of glamorized idea of the tortured writer, right? So it's like the person who writing is such a struggle and it's like supposed to be really hard and you have to do all this kind of like crazy stuff to become a good writer. And no, being a tortured like writer doesn't make you a better writer. There are plenty of writers with like healthy lives who don't have to spend like days and days awake on caffeine and like alcohol and stuff trying to write. Like, that's not a healthy way to write. And at the end of the day, that glamorized idea it's not true. You don't need to be this tortured artist to be considered a good writer. So I think that's also really, really important to remember. Writing should be fun. It should be, I mean, obviously there are always going to be some difficulties with writing because it is work and stuff like that, but it should overall be fun and enjoyable. If you're not enjoying it, if it's making you miserable, you don't have to be a writer. Like, you don't have to do it. No one is forcing you to do it. So if you are struggling with it and you're finding actually this wasn't as fun as I thought, you don't have to do it. So don't do it. If you can still be involved in the writing community. You could be like a beta reader, or like offer your editing services or anything like that. If you are finding that actually the process of writing is not for you, like, you don't have to do it. No one's making you do it. And that brings me on to my last point, which is that I think for a lot of people, when we're like, especially young writers, we want to become like, a lot of us want writing to be a full-time job, right? Like, a lot of us want to get published, and therefore we start treating our writing like it's a business. Like, we start saying, oh, I have to do it this way, and I have to get this many words down, and I have to edit in this way, and then I have to send out all these queries and stuff like that. And then doing that can sometimes take away from the actual joy of writing. So I think it's really, really important to remember that, you know, even if you want to become, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to become a full-time author and things like that, but at the end of the day, you need to remember that at the core of it, the reason why you started, like, try and go back to why writing is fun. So, you know, go back to your roots, maybe pick up a notebook instead of a laptop and, like, write like when you're a little kid again, and just find out why did you start writing? What made it enjoyable for you? I mean, why did you guys, like, what part of writing is enjoyable for you when you're like coming back from burnout and you're starting to remember why you enjoy writing? What bits are like the things that really stand out to you as enjoyable?
I think it's definitely my spontaneity of it. I mean, I really love, a lot of the times my writing comes from just, I'm sitting in class and this is a boring lesson that my teacher's teaching, and oh, look at that bird. Oh my god, look at that bird. Let me write a poem. Like, it's the strangest thing ever, but I think that's my favorite part about it, because it just kind of happens and those words just kind of spill out, and I just kind of scribble it down in my notebook, and then, you know, rip a few pages maybe, and then come back and edit it later, and it becomes this piece that I really enjoy. And I really love just taking this random thought in my mind and building on it and just snowballing it until it becomes this put together, like, piece of writing, really, and using my imagination in that sense, and just kind of treating it like a kid and using that to have fun with it, you know? What about you, Ruby?
Yeah, I think for me, what I always come back to is that, like, few things, like, excite me the way writing does, honestly. Like, when I'm really getting into what I'm writing, when I'm really getting into the plot or the characters, or I'm just really, like, in their heads, it's so, like, thrilling almost. Like, just the whole idea of, wow, I have the power right now, like, to make whatever I want happen, and the suspension of reality, I think, is just such a unique experience, and I feel like writing itself is such a unique experience. Like, I love how invested I get in, like, my characters' lives, and I also love how, like, comforting it is to, like, come back to my writing and be like, this is so familiar, and, like, even if, you know, sometimes I feel like it sucks, I love it a solid 99.9% of the time, and I love reading it, and I love being around settings and being around characters in my own writing that are just so comforting, almost, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects of writing that I really, really like. I think sort of getting almost like, it feels like I'm sort of reading a book as I'm writing it, if that makes sense. Like, you're reading the book that you've always wanted to read. And also, like you said, going back to old work is it's so cringy, but it's also really, really fun seeing how you've changed so much, like, with your writing and all of that. I don't know, there's an essence of writing, an aspect of it that I can't quite put into words, but I just find it's just the most fun. It's just the most fun thing to do for me. It's just writing, whether it be a proper novel or just a couple of words. It's just a lot of fun, and I think it's really important to remember that aspect of fun when writing. So, do you guys have any tips for not just? So we've talked a bit about how, like, you need to recognize burnout, and how when you are burnt out, taking time away and sort of resting up. Do you have any tips on preventing burnout? So when you sort of safeguards that you can put into place to sort of stop yourself from getting to that burnout point in the first place?
Yeah, I think just like I talked about before, just figure out what balance works for you, because it's going to be different for every person. Every writer is going to have a different threshold of what they can handle. So I think you need to really notice, like, when you start feeling really drained or really tired from a project, then figure out, okay, what was the part that was too much for me, and how can I stop doing that and go about writing this in more of a way that's not difficult and not tiring. And I know for me, it's really helpful to have like a schedule, especially when like in revisions and stuff. I'll do like, okay, I'm gonna revise like one chapter a day or half a chapter a day. And I set that threshold as something that I know I can handle. And then even if you can't handle the threshold that you set for yourself, pull back on it. It's okay. It's not like the end of the world for you to not do exactly what you set out to do.
For me, I think it has a lot to do with reminding myself that I am human. I cannot go an entire day without eating food. It doesn't work that way. I just get so involved in my writing, and I'm just so in that zone that I completely forget that time and reality exists outside of my laptop, and I'm like attached. I can't stop writing. I do this a lot. I set like alarms on my phone, and I'll like set them to remind myself like, hey, get up, stretch, take a break, go drink some water, go touch some grass, go go eat some food, or go to bed, because sometimes I'll stay up till like 1 a.m. writing, and it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So just remind yourself that you're a human being. You have basic human needs, and you have to take care of your physical body as well as your writing. So I just definitely take care of yourself and prioritize your mental health and your physical health over anything.
Yeah, I totally agree with the taking care of your health. Try and get like 8 hours of sleep every night. I always do the thing of, I think often we get more burnt out if we're not taking care of ourselves, and things like stretching when you're writing, because for so many of us writers, we're kind of hunched over, like, and we sort of start typing and then we end up with like shoulder pains and stuff like that. So it's really important. You can find a ton of videos on YouTube actually about sort of the best stretches to do to kind of stretch out your muscles here, so which is really, really important to sort of stretch those muscles, and like make sure you're taking sort of like a break even like, I think you should take a break every hour to get up, stretch, get some water every hour. I know a lot of people get really into the writing bit, but even though it's hard, you gotta like get up and sort of stretch for a bit, because otherwise you're gonna end up with back pain, and that's not good. That's gonna lead you to sort of associating writing with pain, which you don't want to do that. You want to make writing fun as possible. Also, I think almost treating writing as like a self-care exercise in some ways. So like, set the mood. I like to do that, sort of write in a really nice place, sort of having a nice area to write in, maybe have like the light coming in, and sort of setting the ambience is a really great way to kind of associate writing with good things and not this kind of stressful, harsh thing that you have to do, otherwise you're gonna like fail as a writer. Just sort of keeping an eye on yourself, I think, is really, really important. And like Ruby said, balancing is key. Pulling back if you need to pull back. So like I said in the last episode, doing things like nano can really burn yourself out, because you're writing so much in like a month. So it's really important afterwards to recognize, okay, I need to pull back from my writing for a bit, give my brain a bit of a rest, maybe watch some movies instead, do some reading, look at the sunset, talk to a stranger, dance in the rain, kind of thing. So just really recognizing your own limitations, I think, is really important. And recognizing that it doesn't really matter if you don't write for a bit, and not comparing yourself to other writers who maybe, at least visibly, don't seem to be suffering with burnout like you are, because even if you can't see it there, I'm sure there are other people who are also suffering and from burnout, and who may also think that, oh, no one else is doing it. So
something else I wanted to mention as well was writer's block, because writer's block is something big that like a lot of writers struggle. Pretty much, honestly, if you're a writer, you're gonna struggle with writer's block at some point. And I just wanted to add in that if you're struggling from writer's block, that's probably the first sign before like total and complete burnout. So maybe when you get a little bit of writer's block, maybe it's time to step away, consider some of the tips that we just shared, and take a break. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think a lot of tips that apply to burnout also apply to writer's block, like of how you can move past it, because writer's block is very real. I think another tip that I have is I usually, when I burn out, I really like to do things that like creatively fill me up. That's a very vague sentence, but things like that. I love listening to like music that is like just like gets my creative juices flowing. I have a lot of really great music recs for songs like that, but anyways, we don't have time for that. And so I think that's really important. I know for me, watching movies really helps me. Especially okay, for some reason rom-coms always get me in the mood to write.
I mean, you are a romance writer.
I'm, yeah. I don't know, something about a rom-com, like, when I watch it, I'm like, wow, I want to go write now. So, find things like that, like, inspire you to write. I think that can really help with burnout, and I think that can really help with writer's block as well.
Yeah, I think something that I always like to do is sort of go back to your like roots. So the things that started inspiring you to write, there's certain books I love to read when I'm kind of in that sort of creative block. So there's certain books that have like a writing style that really, really inspired me, and I like to just go back and read them and go, oh yeah, so that's how this writer has done this thing, and I really enjoy looking at that. Also looking at my old writing, I feel like that's a really weird one for writer's block / burnout, but I feel looking at your old writing and seeing how much you have improved can be really, really motivating. At least for me, I really love looking at like the first thing I ever wrote and seeing how bad it is and how much better I've gotten. It's just really a great way to sort of encourage yourself and remind yourself that even if maybe you're not the greatest writer in the world, you're not in competition with the greatest writer in the world. You're in competition like with yourself, and seeing how you have grown as a writer is like the most rewarding experience ever, because it's like, oh my god, I used to be a really bad baby writer and now I'm an okay sort of writer. So yeah, that's one of my tips, is just looking at your old writing. Save everything, never ever destroy your writing. Even if you hate it, even if you think like this is the worst piece of garbage I've ever written, you will regret it if you delete it. That is my like cardinal rule. Never ever 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 delete your writing. If you do, I will come to your house and I will slap you.
Whoa.
That is a promise.
Wow.
Oh my god.
What happens to not
Okay.
getting toddlers, guys?
There's no toddlers listening to this.
But yeah, something that really inspires me. I mean, I do all the things you guys just said, but I'm really attached to a certain book that I have, so I just read that over and over again. Ruby's mouthing, which one? It's actually like a kind of a collection of, it's called In the Event, oh wait, what is it? Yeah, In the Event This Doesn't Fall Apart by Shannon Lee Berry. It's the greatest. It's like a collection of prose and poetry. I love Shannon Lee Berry, but that's a rant for another episode. But something that really inspires me is visiting kind of other people's works that are similar to mine. There's this one YouTube channel that I really like to look at when I'm like struggling to write. Ruby, again, I know you can't see, is going, what is it? But it's I'm gonna say this wrong, but the username is HeyXNatalie. She's on YouTube. She's on Instagram too, but her YouTube content is really amazing because it's very similar to what I want to make one day on a YouTube channel. Maybe, I'm just saying.
Okay.
But her stuff is just really inspiring. So visiting other people's works kind of reminds, and seeing them enjoy it really reminds me of why I enjoy it. And also reading my old works, like that one Percy Jackson fan fiction that I mentioned a few episodes ago.
We'll hear it one day. Bring it on the pod. Bring it on the pod.
Bring it on the
Bring
pod.
it on
No.
pod. Bring it on the pod.
But I also really like laying on my floor and listening to music. That's very specific, but it's just fun. It's fun.
Laying on your
Yeah.
floor is good.
I love that you mentioned writing YouTubers. I forgot. I love watching like writing vlogs.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
they
love
bring me
writing
so much
YouTubers.
joy. Yeah, I don't watch
Those are
many like straight up writing YouTubers. A lot of the ones that I really like are like book YouTubers who also like write. So like, oh my gosh, Catty-tastic, I love her. Her writing vlogs are So good.
Yeah, no, writing YouTube is a great way to like kind of remind yourself that, because it's so funny, you're like seeing them struggle and you go, yeah, I've been there, I've had that like same mental breakdown over writing. Something else actually I want to that kind of I don't know why it came into my head was this might also be a bit of a weird one, but I really like when I'm burnt out giving feedback on other people's work. Not in like a Simon Cowell, I mean, because I'm dead inside kind of way, but kind of seeing how like other people also have kind of the same writing problems, because sometimes when you're writing your own book you kind of forget, like you kind of look at it and you go, oh my god, there's so many mistakes, it's so terrible, and then you read someone else's work and you think, wow, this is amazing, but this also has mistakes. This also, like, even reading like properly published books, if you've ever gone through them with like a critical eye and you go, wait, this person's used a lot of adverbs, I love doing that because it makes me feel better, because I'm like, wow, even though this book is like the best-selling book ever, this one has like a mistake here, like not like a mistake but like a creative mistake, like too many adverbs or whatever. So maybe I'm just as good as this writer if that person's making the exact kind of same editing mistake that I've made as well. So that's one weird piece of advice I have for burnout in comparison, is just like kind of critically and analyzing other people's works and sort of realizing that everyone has those kind of mistakes. And so,
Well, speaking of that, you can sign up to be a beta reader alpha
Yeah.
or editor at Tiny
Actually,
if you want to do it.
I am a beta reader, and the reason I started beta reading with
Oh.
Tylee was because I was burnt out. And I figured I don't really know where to start writing, so why not go read other people's writing? And it's a really great way to grow yourself as a writer and a reader and a person, so I would highly recommend doing it. Just saying.
shout out to our tiny
Yeah.
beta readers.
We love
Shout out to
you.
betas!
Love
Shout out to
you.
you! Love you! Writing when we feel inadequate, whether it be because we don't think we're good enough or because of personal things in our life, should be a reprieve, never a burden. When you're feeling down, resist the urge to open your current novel and add another chapter just because you feel like you have to. You don't have to. And good writers know when to step back from their work. Try listening to what you and your body need, and oftentimes, sleep and proper self-care are a good answer.
As writers, we pride ourselves on writing characters of all walks of life, either brilliant to the bone or utterly hopeless, deadly or benevolent. Our horizons are so wide in the realm of fiction, but sometimes bringing that perfectionist gaze to evaluate how we're doing and what we need is a skill we need to develop if we want to write for many years to come. But it's important to remember that being too much of a perfectionist is going to lead to burnout.
And longevity for writers doesn't come without proper time and space away from our notebooks and laptops. When we approach a work in progress or a new work, it should be with the intent to enjoy and learn from the process that it's giving us, not a fear that, overwhelms us when we start it. What other people think doesn't matter as long as you're writing what makes you happy.
And don't let anybody tell you different. All of us are not the same. We have varying backgrounds, identities, we're spread across the world, but when you look past all of those qualities, we're human, and we face burnout eventually. So when it comes, be prepared with acceptance in yourself and readiness to take it day by day, and it is a sign of growth, not a weakness.
So for this week, we're going to challenge you guys to either write a story about burnout. So write about a character who's feeling burnt out, maybe you write about yourself who's feeling burnt out. And if you're feeling burnt out and you're thinking, actually, I want to take a break, then that is the other challenge. So we have two challenges, either write a story about burnout or take a break if you are burnt out. Look up some of the ways to fill yourself up creatively, maybe think about some of the tips that we've given. You can also find a ton of tips about burnout online. And like we said, if it's more than burnout, if it's something else, then please seek a professional's help.
And that's all for today. Thank you for listening, Writing Cadets, and we'll see you on our next adventure.
We did it!
Yay! And I have a cheeseburger waiting for me downstairs. I'm very excited.
Thank you for listening to the Moving Right Along podcast made possible by the Young Writers Initiative. Tune in next episode for our grand finale to Season 1. You can follow us on Instagram at Moving Right Along Podcast or find us on tywi.org. And while you're there, why not follow the link to our Discord server, The Writers Town. Thank you to our amazing team without whom this wouldn't be possible. Once Upon a Time, Cassette, Happily Ever After, Jasmine, In the Beginning, Simone, and A Dark and Stormy Night, Dell. All sound effects are taken from the freesoundproject.org, and all music is from Kevin MacLeod at filmmusic.io. Today you heard Beauty Flow.